We will do the question on weighted average now. The first one is on the periodic inventory system, and you use the weighted average. Now remember, in the periodic inventory system, you don't have to determine what is the change in the value of inventory every time when a transaction occurs, and you don't have to calculate cost of sales every time. That is done at the end of the year. So if we look at the question given here, you start with 80 units at R4 each. That will give you 320 rand. Then you purchase 100 units at R5, 500 rand. Now remember, you mustn't take the sales into account. When you do this calculation to determine the value of inventory, you only take purchases into account and not sales. Okay, then purchase 200 units at R6, 1,200 rand, 150 units at R7 will give me 1,050, and now there's return. So it means some of this 150 is returned to the supplier, so the number of units will decrease with 30. The price that we paid for those units was 7, so it means the value of your inventory, the cost will decrease with 210. Then you purchase 100 units at R7.50 and 100 units at R8. Okay, so the total number of units that you had available this year is 700. And if we take the total cost into account, it is 4,410. Because we use the weighted average method, it means that I have to calculate the average price now. So what we had available is 700. We sold, so you have to add up all the sales, so it's 100 units, 240 units, 150 units, 150 units that was sold. So we sold in total 640 units. So what we have left over at the end of the year is 60 units. If we calculate the average price, I take the 4,410, the total price, divided by 700, and that will give me R6.30. So the average price is R6.30. Now you can see the average price is lower than the last purchases that we had because we took all those cheap prices into consideration as well. And because we work with the average price, you will see that the total cost and the value of your closing inventory will not be the same as when you use the first in, first out method, because your closing inventory in the first in, first out method will only be these last ones that was purchased for R8. In the weighted average, we determine the average price for the whole period, and that gave us R6.30. So I must multiply the number of units available at the end of the year with the average price, giving us the closing inventory value as 378. If we look at cost of sales, we must determine what was the total number of units that we sold, 640. The average price is R6.30, so it means the cost of sales is 4,032. So when we do the weighted average method, we calculate the average price. We don't sell the old ones first, so they don't care where they put them. They're not kept separately. You don't care whether you sell the first ones or the last ones. It's the same. But when you use the periodic inventory system, we don't have to go and calculate the average price every time when we do the weighted average. So you will see that when we do the calculation, using the perpetual system and weighted average, you will not get the same answers, because in the perpetual system you have to work out the average price every time when something happens to your inventory. You return, you buy, or you sell inventory. So we will do the weighted average one now. And if we look at the weighted average, it means that I'm going to use this big table to make it easier to do the calculation. And I start the inventory at the beginning of the year with 80 units or at 4 rand. And that gives me 320 rand. And then on the 9th, we bought 100 units at 5 rand at a cost of 500 rand. So when we buy goods, we put it under purchases column. If we sell goods, we want to determine what is the cost of sales, then we will put it under the cost of sales column. Now, every time when we sell something or we purchase goods, we have to determine how many units we have available then. So we had 80 plus the 100, means that we have 180 units. Then we take the 320 plus the 500, giving me 820. Every time when you purchase goods or you return goods to the supplier, you will work out the average price. So I will take the 820 divided by the 180 units, and that gives me 4 rand 56. Okay, then we sell 100 units. Okay, so it means under cost of sales, I will show that we sell 100. The average price is 456. So the total cost of sales is 456. So I have to decrease the 100, giving me 80 units. Then I take the 820 minus the 456. That will give me 364. When we sell goods, we don't change the average price. So the average price will remain 4 rand 56. Now, what's very important here is that you mustn't multiply the 80 with the 4 rand 56, because you will not get that answer, because we round off the figures when we work out the average price. So you have to take the number of units you had, the 180, plus the 100 that we buy, and we subtract the 100 from the 180, and that will give me 80 rand. Then you go to the actual money. So you take the 820 minus the 456, and that will give me the 364. So I will only calculate the new average price when we buy goods or we return goods to the supplier. Okay, then on the 28th, we buy 200 units again at 6 rand, 1,200. So I have to show that I'm going to adjust my number of units. 200 plus 80 will give me 280. The average price will now change. So I will take the 364 plus the 1,200, and that will give me 1,564. And I will divide that by 280 to determine what is the new average price. So my average price now changed to 4 rand 59. The next entry here is on April the 1st, when we sell 240 units at the average price of 459. And if I multiply that, I get 110160. Okay, so now my number of units and the value will change again. So I take the 280 minus the 240, and now we only have 40 units. The average price is 459. You don't multiply. You take the 1564 minus the 1101, and that will give me the new value as 462.40. Okay, then on the 14th of April, we buy 150 units again at 7 Rand, giving me 1,050. My number of units and value will change again. So it's the 150 plus the 40 will give me 190. Then the 462 plus the 1050 will give me 1512 Rand 40. I purchased goods, so it means I have to work out the new average price again. So it's 1512 Rand 40 cents divided by 190. And that gives me 7 Rand 96. Okay, on the 22nd of April, we return goods. So of this 150 that we purchase, we send 30 back, so my number of units will decrease with 30. We paid 7 Rand for it, so we will receive 7 Rand back. And that means if I multiply that, it means my total purchases will decrease with 210 Rand. So we had 190 units, we returned 30, and now we have 160 units. The 1512 minus the 210 will give me the new value, and that is 1302 Rand 40. Because we returned goods, it means I have to calculate the average price again. So it's 1302 Rand 40 divided by 160. And when I do that, I get a new average price of 8 Rand 14 cents. Okay, on the 25th, we bought 100 units again at 7 Rand 50. So my purchases increased with 750. My number of units will now change from 160 plus the 100 to 260. The total cost of my inventory value at this stage is the 1302 plus the 750, and that will give me 2052 Rand 40. Because we purchase, we work out the average price again, and we divide it by 260, and that will give me an average price of 7 Rand 89. On the 28th of May, we sell 150 units. So under cost of sales, I will indicate 150. The average price is 7 Rand 89. That will give me 1183 Rand and 50 cents. So because I sold goods, I've got less inventory, 260 minus 150, so we've got 110 units available. And the value of my inventory will decrease from 2052 to the new value, so I will decrease these figures from each other, and that will give me 868 Rand 90. Because I sold goods, I don't change the average price, so I will use the same price. On the 17th of June, we bought 100 units at 8 Rand, so the purchases increase with 800 Rand. And then I show that my number of units will now increase to 210. And I will add the 800 to the 868, and that will give me the new value. Now, because we purchase again, I will work out the average price, 1668 Rand 90, divide by 210, and that will give me R7.95. Okay, then on the 29th of June, we sell 150 units. So 150 units times the average price of R7.95, and that will give me R1192.50. Of the 210 units, we've only got 60 units left over, and if I subtract those two, it gives me R476.40, and my average price will remain the same. Okay, then I add up my purchases, and it will give me 3370, and if I add up my cost of sales, it will give me 3933.60. Now, if we look at the periodic inventory system that we just used now, we said the closing inventory is 376. So in periodic, the closing inventory was 37. Okay, and if we look at the cost of sales there, it was 4032. Okay, if we look at the perpetual system when we use the average, what do we see now? There's a big difference. The cost of sales when we use the perpetual system will be 3933.60, and the closing inventory will be 476.40. So what does this indicate to me? That when I use the periodic system, I can use any one of the two methods to do the calculation because I will get the same result. If I use the perpetual system, I must determine which method I must use. So if I use the perpetual system with the weighted average, it means I have to do this big column because the two calculations will be totally different. So it means that I must determine exactly. They don't normally ask the perpetual system with the weighted average, but they can ask it. So ensure that you know how to do this calculation. In the majority of cases, they will ask you weighted average with periodic, and they will ask you first in, first out with the periodic. But you must remember that if they ask the perpetual system, you must determine exactly which one of the two methods you must use to do the correct calculation, otherwise your answers will be wrong. I hope you understand this inventory systems better and that you understand how to do the calculation to determine the value of your inventory and the total cost of sales by the end of the year. Good luck for the exams.